Delighted to say Tommy Robinson joins us from Rebel TV. Hello, Tommy.
How you doing, John?
As Richard Littlejohn would say, you couldn't make this up, could you?
You couldn't make it up. And the fact, if I remember rightly, I haven't looked into this again today, but if I remember rightly, he was working in Sainsbury's or Asda. He was working in the supermarket.
Yeah, before he went, he was a shelf stacker, yeah.
He was a shelf stacker. So we have a shelf stacker, and the only way he's been prosecuted is because Sky News got the list of all the jobs for the ISIS fighters. If Sky News didn't do that, this man would be strolling around our city centre, probably stacking shelves in Asda again, and none of us would be any the wiser. How many other people are there like that? Now, my worry comes from the recent demographical change and growth forecast for the UK and for Europe, where the demographics show, and this is from Pew Research, that they expect the Muslim community to triple. Right? The demographic to triple. Now, they've already raised the cost from $12 billion a year to $15 billion a year in monitoring these jihadis. That's £290 million a week we spend. £290 million a week we're spending monitoring them. Just monitoring them. If you triple that, can we really afford that as we go forward in our country? When you see the cutbacks on the rest of society, the NHS cutbacks, the police cutbacks, all of these cutbacks everywhere are coming at the cost of our freedom, our security, our stability, at the hands of jihadists who simply should not be here, should be killed in foreign fields, and we are allowing the enemy back.
But Tommy, yes. I would agree with a lot of what you're saying. And Gavin Williamson, the new Defence Secretary this morning, said they shouldn't be returning, they should have been slotted or killed on the battlefield. But what if they haven't been? And we know there's 700 coming back, many of which will hold UK passports. What would you do, Tommy Robinson? You would not allow them in, or what? Would you hand them over to Syria, to Assad to deal with, or what?
No,
what would you physically do?
I'll teach a lesson to every single one of them. They'd spend their entire rest of their life on solitary confinement with zero halal meat, no Quran, nothing to do with Islam. They'd be locked in a room, the door would be open once a day, and they'd get their food to stay alive. And that is it. That is how those barbarians should be treated. That's how we need to treat them. We need to send a strong message to the rest of them. That's what your life will entail if you do this. You will not live your life in a complete halal environment in prison, enjoying your time, recruiting and radicalising, and actually taking a further step towards heaven. Because if they recruit people for Islam, that's their pathway to heaven. We're still allowing them to get their pathway to heaven in their own ideology. We need to use that ideology against them. John, I'm up now. Yeah, I've just been in Batley, an area up in Yorkshire, and I've sat down and I've interviewed the owner of a newspaper for 30 years. Okay. So he's wrote stories for 30 years on all of these issues. You'll see this video coming out online, on Rebel, on my Facebook. Yeah. Now, he's just told me that they have Sharia courts that operate in, where they're summoning non-Muslims to Sharia courts for incidences. And when the non-Muslim lad has turned up to this Sharia tribunal, there's 2 police officers sat monitoring it. I think people in the UK have no idea what's going on. I thought I was completely down with what's happening in our country. I've just spent an hour listening to a man who's done 40 years' worth of journalism in the Batley area, and I've heard absolute horror stories about how the police... Basically, a campaign we run last week called Justice for Nikki, which was about a young English girl who received 50 stitches in her face after... Yeah, and there was no police response to it. Well, this journalist has just told me that that's nothing. That's not news to us up here. That happens all the time. And the police are hiding it. They don't cover it. They don't monitor it. There's not even a police station now.
And did this newspaper editor say why he thought this was going on? Colonel Richard Kemp has just talked about eggshells when it comes to Muslims, when it comes to the Israeli question. This is why everyone's condemning Trump rather than saying actually he may have an answer here. I mean, what is it? Are they scared that Muslims will?
Yeah, he explained over the years that when they've made arrests for the Muslim community, hundreds of them have turned up at the police station, literally attacking the police station. And then they've had to call for backup, and there's not enough backup there. Within Batley, within Dewsbury, he said he's watched this for years. Now, they've closed the police stations, there's no police in there. There's no police force in that area. They come from Huddersfield now, 10 miles out. And what happens now, as he explained with the Sharia courts, is the community police themselves. Unless, of course, there are attacks. And he said, this attack against Nikki, that's one of 20 a year. He said, that's happening all the time. You'll see this interview from him, and he's talking about how the politicians are working with them. Even Tracy Brabin. We're hearing about, this was the area Joe Cox was killed in.
She the one who took over from Joe Cox, yeah.
So he's the one who took over Joe Cox. She's completely, he said she's part of the problem when he's talking about the issues in there. No one will talk about these issues. They just want them to go away, pretend they're not there, pretend they're not happening. It's complete takeover in towns and cities.
Okay, so solutions?
Solutions, what he says, I asked him, what do we need to do? He said, implement the rule of law equally across all communities. It's quite simple. The laws we already have should be implemented, but they're not. They never are.
Yeah,
He told me about
I
a
agree.
case.
Yeah.
He explained about a case of a man who had a funeral parlour for 30 years, and it was on council land, and he just never paid the council a penny. And when his paper researched into this, he'd never paid any tax. He's never paid the council, and then the council come out blaming themselves, saying, well, look, because of cultural sensitivities, because they were burying Muslims, and we didn't want to ask them for the money that they owe us for the land. But no one done anything. And he said, whereas in all these cases, things could be done and the law could be implemented, but they don't. They're so scared.
No.
Everyone's so
this
scared.
This is why I say we shouldn't have Sharia, and we have to have the same laws for everyone, and it needs to be put in place right across the board, because that's the answer, isn't it?
That is, if you have the incident where, like the young English girl this week was beaten severely in that area, there wasn't even 3 weeks later. There's no mention of it. He actually said the first time they mentioned about it, the first time they put out a witness appeal was when we broke it, when we made a massive deal out of it. The police had done nothing. They weren't even investigating it. A young English girl has got 50 stitches in her face and called a dirty white slag, and they're not even investigating it. And when I said to him, how much is this going on? He said, this is going on all the time. This is nothing. And out of every 20 attacks, one will be against a Muslim. So 19 attacks against non-Muslims from an area that is 50% Muslim and 50% non-Muslim. And then he spoke about when there was an incident where a Muslim was attacked severely, then all of our country's media flew up there because it was a suspected hate crime. And they said, and then it turned out it wasn't. It was Muslim on Muslim. But for that minute there, you had the BBC, you had ITV, you had all the media outlets ready to run this big story of a hate crime, whereas there's hate crimes against members of our community happening there across the board in Dewsbury and Batley.
How do we change that, though, Tommy?
Well, you have to have politicians.
Hang on a minute. I had a run-in with Jada this week or last week, because she talks about repatriation of all Muslims and they've got to stop practicing their religion. I think that's ridiculous. But she's attracting supporters because I believe the vacuum's being left by mainstream politicians who seem scared to handle this and do it. What do you think?
I think that once you come down harsh, and when I say harsh, it's harsh but fair, on people committing terrorism, jihadists, groomers, once there's some serious offences put on them, like deportations for any criminals. Like
that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. And I would agree with you. Like these jihadis, I'd chuck them out the plane without even landing it. That's a different issue. Yeah. But she's talking about the whole of the Muslim community has to go. I think she's wrong. But I understand why she's saying it and why it's becoming attractive to people because of some of the examples you just cited.
I agree, and I think that many Muslims will be made to make the choice when if the law is implemented equally and properly across their community. And you may see many of them that are silent at the minute because they are scared, because of the way their community is controlled. You may give them an extra voice.
Look at the way apostates are treated. We know that, don't we? Or indeed people who are parts of other Muslim cults. Mr. Shah up in Glasgow, of course, who was pulled out and killed in the street by that savage from Huddersfield. So it's happening within the Muslim community as well. But the point I'm trying to ask you, though, Tommy, you don't agree that all Muslims need to leave, do you?
No, I don't. No. But I do agree we need to tackle down on the spread of Islam and the Islamisation of our country. Repatriation of terrorists, that's separate. I think that anyone if we have 23,000 Muslims, my complete fear, which people have to take into a reality, is the demographic's going to triple. The Muslim demographic in this country is going to triple, which means if we have 23,000 Muslims on a terror watch list, that will become 60,000 if the situation doesn't get worse. Now, if you look at the views, if you look at the views of Muslims aged 18 to 30, that's the bit that then they're a lot worse than 30 to 40. So the views on apostasy, their views on punishment, their views on jihad, their views on extremism are getting worse as the generations go down. So as we go down 2-3 more generations where it triples, rather than seeing 23,000 become 66 or 69,000, we may well see over 100,000 jihadists in our country. Then what are we meant to do? We can't afford to monitor them. We simply can't monitor them now. So my thing is, it's a real wake-up call to say we need to really get this, because it's the next generation, which are our children, that we're going to owe a debt to for not dealing with this.
So you're laying the blame at the Islamists' door, the terrorists, etc., Sharia, but also at our politicians, our police, our social services, because they're not doing enough to tackle it. And like in Rotherham or Rochdale, turning a blind eye to the rape of white girls or the violence that you're talking about with this young white woman that you've been on about for the last week or two.
Yeah, I don't really blame Muslims for wanting Sharia as part of their indoctrination and their ideology. I don't blame them for wanting all the things that they're demanding. I blame our weak, pathetic councils and governments that are handing it to them and turning a blind eye. The police forces who are wanting a quiet life to get their pension and allowing all our youth to come under attack. That's all I blame. So
how can you see how can you see change happening, Tommy? You seem to have no confidence in the police or the MPs or councillors because you're documenting it on Rebel TV. You're showing us the truth, just like Raheem Kassam does in his book No Go Zones. But how are we going to change it? Because the majority of people believe and agree with you that it has to be tackled, and I would hazard a guess there's an awful lot of Muslims who want it tackled as well. But it ain't happening. So how's it going to happen?
The will's not there to tackle it. The will is not there. It's exactly the same as I just finished my interview with this Danny, who's the owner of the newspaper. I said, how do you see it changing? And he said, the will's not there for it to change. There's no will to tackle it. There's no will. And until the situation gets so bad, things are changing slowly. You see more people awake now, more people listening to what the problems we face. But the fight in people is still not there to tackle it. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to have a few more years of complete carnage, terrorism, jihadism, more children killed, probably schools targeted. We see this morning they were going to target Prince George. All of these sort of things are going to come into fruition. Children will be attacked in schools, and then people will be scratching their heads. And for years, until the public will is there, until the people are screaming and demanding that this happens. But unfortunately, after all these terrorist attacks, you hold a march, and only 10,000 people may come out. Until every single person's ready to get out on the streets of this country and demand change, I don't think we'll see change. Because at the minute, as I've just heard from this area of Batley, the people holding the political power, the people swaying the seats in the politics with the vocal forward, according to this journalist, is all the Islamic community. So the Labour Party are completely across our country sending us out to these groups who are maintaining the power. So
that was certainly the argument. That was the argument with the abuse, wasn't it, in Rotherham? And it was also the argument when the Labour Party, the Socialist Party, allowed segregated meetings during the last election campaign. I mean, that's just horrendous. I mean, that's only a small issue, but it just epitomises how these radicals are taking over the country. Go on,
John. Jeremy Corbyn working with men. Jeremy Corbyn works with men. He shares a platform and stands up on stages with men, as does Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester. Men, the second man in control is Azad Ali. The head of men is Azad Ali. He's on record as saying we will only use democracy to implement Sharia. These are his quotes. He's on record as saying that British soldiers are legitimate targets for terrorism. These are all things he's on record as saying. Yet here's Jeremy Corbyn embracing him. Jeremy Corbyn calls Hamas, with the whole talk of this Israel-Jerusalem situation, Jeremy Corbyn calls Hamas his friends. Article 7 or Article 6 on Hamas's manifesto, their manifesto for their political group, says the final day of judgment will not come until all the Jews are exterminated. They're his friends. He calls them his friends. This is a man who has fooled half of the youth of our country into voting for him because they think they're going to get things for free. Nothing's for free. It's not going to be for free. You'll end up paying for it eventually, yeah? And this is a man that has risen now through our politics, has massive support now in the youth movement in the country. We're turning completely socialist as a youth, and they have no idea the dangers and consequences that we're going to face under the leadership of a communist like him. And that's what my biggest fear is. And all of this is happening right under our noses, and everyone's just plodding on, going to work every day like there's no problem. And as I said, our children are going to suffer. They're going to suffer immensely. And I think that this whole era we're going through in history will be viewed back upon as the suicide of Europe. We're committing self-suicide. We're orchestrating and funding with our own money. Many of the instances, our own money is paying for this. We're paying for this ourselves. Our own taxpayers' money is being used to destroy our nations. So.
Tom, passionate, like it, Tommy. Thank you very much indeed, Tommy Robinson from Rebel TV.